If you're a landlord trying to figure out what your property should rent for, don't just check Zillow or go off what your neighbor said. That's how people lose money, by either pricing too low or too high. That's right, overpricing your rental property is just as bad because it means not only it sits longer, but it actually attracts only bad tenants because smart qualified tenants skip overpriced listings. That leaves you with people who can't compete elsewhere, and a bad tenant is a bigger problem than an empty home. So I want to help you avoid leaving money on the table and avoid the wrong renters, but you need the real data and you need to know how to use it. In this video, I'll walk you through exactly how I price rentals, the tools I use, how I analyze the comps, and what most landlords miss. And at the end, I'll show you a free tool from Good Life that calculates potential vacancy loss at different rent prices, so you can price smarter and profitably. Before we jump in, my name's Steve Welty. I'm CEO of Good Life Property Management. We manage over 1,600 rentals in Southern California. And if you get value from this video, please hit like and please consider subscribing for more valuable tips.
All right, friends. So for this demo market analysis, I just picked the first house that popped up on Zillow for rent in Irvine. This one's on Sierra Luna Road. And so what I'm gonna do first is go to Zillow.com, manage rentals, and go down to Zillow Rental Manager. And then I'm going to go to price my rental. This is a really cool tool. It's free, and you pop your address in there and click continue. All right, so it's gonna give you a Zestimate. First thing you should know is that your property is 9 times out of 10 not worth what the Zestimate says. Zillow traditionally has price points overinflated for a couple reasons. One, because they're in the business to get customers and get eyeballs, and if they told everyone their property was worth what it actually is worth, people would get upset and they would go to maybe another platform. So it's kind of like built in a little bit high. I use 10%. Like, you always know that the Zestimate is like 10% high minimum. The other reason is if you look down here, you'll see it has different search criteria. And so it's including all home types, all beds within 5 miles, which is too big of a criteria. It's too big of a filter, too big of a radius. So it's maybe a good just general benchmark, but it's on the high side. In fact, it's usually above market, and it's not super helpful. So what we first want to do is go down here, and we want to only look at houses. So you always want to match property type for property type. If you have a condo, you want to look at condos. Houses, you want to look at houses. Then you always want to match bedrooms. So bedrooms and baths. So 4-bedroom, we only want to look at 4 bedrooms. Now, sometimes if you have like a 5-bedroom house and there's just not a lot of comps, otherwise known as comparable properties, it's shorthand for comparable properties, then you might need to look at 4 bedrooms. If there's not enough 5 bedrooms, let's say, you usually want at least 3 comps, ideally like 5 to look at, but we'll look at houses. And then I want to look, well, actually I'm going to leave distance there for now because I can see how far away it is, but I'm going to uncheck active rentals. We'll come back to that, but for right now, I just want to know what rented recently. What people are asking for is helpful, but we'll talk more about that in a minute. So you'll see if I scroll over, it gives us about 7 comparable properties, which is great. All right, so the first thing I'm going to look at is the square footage, because this property is about 600 square feet bigger than our property. That's a lot. This one's even more. It's like 1,000 square feet bigger. So this is not even what I would consider a comparable. This is way bigger. It has an extra bedroom. Same thing with this one. This is almost 1,000 square feet bigger. Not a good comp. This one's okay. 2,400. We're still kind of that's a little big compared to 1,780 or 1,800, but I'll keep it for now. And then we have this one. So this one's pretty good, actually. This is 2,000 square feet. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at that property on Zillow, and I see that, okay, this property, really nice curb appeal, 3-car garage, beautiful, like vaulted ceiling, kind of modern, mid-century modern feel, upgraded kitchen, just top of end appliances. It looks like really shows really well. It has professional photos. So like this listing just looks really, really good. And so the other thing I'm going to look at is down here. I want to look at the price history. So it looks like it was listed at $5,600 in 2024, and then the listing was removed, which means it probably rented, although it ended up selling. So it looks like they took it off the market and sold it potentially. And then it was listed for rent again at $7,500, and then the listing was removed. So they probably got 75. Maybe they negotiated and got a little bit less than 75, but I like to look at that price history. So if I go back to this part, so it shows at 7,500, 2,000 square feet roughly, it's about $3.69 a foot. So the next thing I'm gonna do is relook at my subject property. Now this will be your property, so you'll be very familiar with it, but I'm gonna look, okay, I have a 2-car garage. I have kind of, looks like nice hardwood floor, but kind of like maybe a dated fireplace, kind of dated tile, you know, and it doesn't show as well. It kind of looks bland. The photos don't look that great because they're kind of like tilted, a kind of dark kitchen. It looks like it was remodeled, but maybe in the late 90s or early 2000s. So it's, you know, definitely a step down as far as fit and finishes. And it's got a little bit of a yard, and I guess it's next to some parks. So that's good to know. So the only other true comp that this report generated was this one on Meadow Suite. And so if I pull up Meadow Suite and I look at these photos, looks like it's got 2 1-car garages, kind of an older feel, like the chandelier's kind of older, dated. The kitchen's kind of, it's upgraded, it's nice. The cabinetry looks very nice. Upgraded fireplace. This home, you know, it's got really nice hardwood floors up the stairs. This home also looks very nice. It doesn't look like it has a picture of the backyard, which maybe it doesn't have a backyard or a very small yard. And so I'll go down to the pricing and I'll see, okay, they listed it for rent 2025, $6,200. And then they reduced after a week, $5,900. And then they reduced after 2 more weeks, $5,800. And then they reduced again a day later, interesting. And then it was finally removed on the 25th. So, you know, it took a little over a month, it looks like, to rent. And they ended up renting for $5,500, initially listed at $6,200. And so if I go back to the description too, I want to look at the home details and try to see, like, is this a furnished rental? Is there anything, is it a short-term lease? You know, is there anything else that might make it not comparable? I don't see anything here. So you can tell this is a big difference. So $2.39 a square foot compared to $3.69 a square foot. And we might say, oh, well, this property was priced too low maybe, but it took a month to rent, you know, a little over a month. So there's more we need to find out. So we're going to go to our next tool, and that is Rentometer. So Good Life has a free rent estimate calculator that is powered by Rentometer, so you don't have to pay for this. You can go to our website, download a rental analysis, and get this data. And so I put this in, the address, 4 beds, 1.5 baths or more, looking back 12 months. I only want houses, and I put some square footage parameters in here because it's about 1,800 square feet, so I don't want anything below 1,400, and I really don't want anything above maybe 2,200. If I click check rents, which I've already done, it pops this up. It gives you the average. I guess I got it at 2,100. So 2,100 is fine. Got the average price for the area, $64.55. Median, the lowest 25th percentile. So this is, you can think of this as properties that are less upgraded. And then the 75th percentile. These are properties that are more upgraded. The cool thing about Rentometer is it shows you different comps that Zillow doesn't pick up sometimes. And so you'll see this one on Sierra Porto Road, right next to the subject property at 0.11, 1,800 square feet. Yes, that's the holy grail of comparable properties. Like the same size, same beds, same baths, same location. So this is gold. I'm gonna weight this comp way heavier than anything else I've seen. And so if I open this up, Sierra Porto Road, look at Redfin, and this one looks really nice. Very nice. You know, this looks like it was staged for sale. Kind of an older kitchen maybe actually, so not as upgraded, but the paint's really nice. They've kind of like spruced it up because this is an older bathroom. The yard's kind of a little messy, but I guess they got not a lot of usable space maybe, but they've got some nice plants and whatnot. And so this one is $3.33 a square foot. So again, I'm gonna jump back to our subject property and say this is actually pretty comparable. You know, it has some granite, but it doesn't have some of the upgraded paint, some of the upgraded, it's probably comparable bathroom, you know? And so these two properties are actually very comparable. And so then I'm gonna jump over to San Ynez Road. This is the one we were actually just looking at, so we don't have to look at that one again. Then I'm gonna see D. So this is the last one that's within a mile. And so a half-mile radius is still good. So this one's 2,043 square feet. Let's look at this one on Sierra Verde. Again, very nice. Great photos. Nice hardwood floors, custom fireplace, little patio area, vaulted ceilings. This one's pretty comparable to our property, our subject property. Has even, let's see what kind of yard it has, perhaps. Yep, nice little yard, little putting green. That's cool. Really nice. It looks like it's nicely kept up, kind of a little bit dated, but kept up really nice. And so if we go back to the listing and we scroll down to the price, history, we'll see it was listed for rent 6,200, dropped it to 6,000, 6,000. Oh, it looks like the listing was removed, but then it was put back up. Who knows what happened? Maybe they thought they rented it and then they backed out. Put back on 61, and then listing removed at 61. So this more than likely rented at 6,100 back at the end of 2024. It has it here at 6,200. So you gotta figure it was probably somewhere in there. One of those numbers is likely right. And it also says it's a 3-bath house. So I have to factor that in. Okay, this one might have an extra half bath, which means that it might be a little bit more in rents. You know, a half bath for a house like this might be an extra couple $100. All right, so now that I've looked at all the comparable properties, the last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna jump back and I'm gonna go, okay, let's look at the comps one last time. Of all the properties we looked at, there's only a few comps. So there's this one at Meadow Suite for $239 a square foot, and I'm gonna write that down. And then there's Sierra Inez at $369 a square foot. So that's like the top of the range. So I know it's between $4,300 and $6,642 because I take the price per square foot and I times it by our square footage of 1,800 roughly. Then I'm gonna jump to Rent-A-Meter. And I'm gonna go, okay, this one was the closest locational comp and also very comparable, although from finish, although this one presents a lot nicer. If you kind of strip away some of the beautiful photos and what, I mean, it does have beautiful flooring. You can see the kitchen is a bit older, but they presented it really well. So this property is actually very comparable. That's at $333. And then the last one is this one on Sierra Verde. And Sierra Verde, or excuse me, what's this one called? This one is called Sierra Verde, yes. Has an extra half bath, shows really well. Kind of older flooring, kind of not very neutral paint, older floor, you know, and the kitchen's nice and has a nice backyard. This one is at $3.03 a square foot. All right, so if you take $3.33 a square foot, times 1,800 square feet for our property, that is roughly $6,000. And if you take $3.03 a square foot times 1,800, that is roughly $5,450. So I know now that the property is worth somewhere between, let's say, $5,500 and $6,000. And if I go back to Zillow and if I take 10% off of this, $650 off of $6,500, you know, you're right below $6,000. So the 10% Zillow rule never fails. You're definitely going to be able to rent this house between $5,500 and $6,000. So I know to factor in seasonality. Now, the next thing I'm going to do before I pick a price point is I'm going to go back to Zillow and I'm going to look at active rentals. And I'm gonna actually take off properties that have rented. And I wanna see what a prospective renter is gonna see when they look at Zillow. So if a prospective renter is like, hey, I wanna be in the Turtle Rock area, I need at least 4 beds, I want a house, you know, this is what they're gonna see. There's only 3 properties that are at least 4 bedrooms, houses currently in this area. And it looks like there's this one, Sierra Luna Road, 5,500. That's the one we're looking at as our subject property. And then there's this one, 7,200 or 7,280 and 7,500. So I know that this isn't very much inventory. It's pretty low. And I know that my property, like this property is listed at a pretty good price. So 5,500 is a pretty competitive price. And you can tell because it's only been active 14 hours as well. So it's probably gonna rent pretty quick. It's on the lower end of the scale. So this owner, for example, might err on the side of like a more competitive rent to make sure they limit vacancy loss. Like, hey, I'd rather just get someone in there in the next couple of weeks versus trying to like max out the top of the market. And then what they can do also is next time the lease goes for renewal, they can then reassess and bring the property closer to market value. And then if I look at these have only been active 14 days as well. So this tells me this is a very, you know, competitive market that, you know, if an owner wanted to start closer to 6,000, I wouldn't fault them. However, just know that the property that rents next in any market is always the best property at the best price. So depending on how fast properties rent in any given area, with just 3 listings, this tells me I have more room if I want to try to get a higher price because there's not a lot of competition. Now, if there was like 8 4 bedrooms in a 3-mile radius, then I would want to price at a lower price because I need to be the next property that rents because I need to be the best property at the best price. So the last thing I want to show you is we have a really cool tool on our website. It's a vacancy versus rent reduction calculator, and it can help you think through different scenarios. So in this particular case, let's say you're like yeah, you know, I maybe could get 6,000, but I really don't want it to sit vacant, but I also don't want to give it away at 5,500. What if we kind of like go in the middle? What if we go 5,700? It's like, okay, cool. Well, how long do you think it take to rent at 5,700? Well, let's see, maybe we can get someone in 3 weeks. Okay, cool. Versus if we go more aggressively and we go 5,500, then yeah, Steve, I think if we do 5,500, like one weekend, we'd be able to rent it. Okay, cool. So I mean, 1 week, let's say. You do a 12-month lease term, you press calculate, and it shows you that scenario 1, the total income is actually $500 less than scenario 2. This is just a guess. You don't really know exactly how long it will take, but talk to a property manager, maybe based on your experience, you know that in this scenario, you actually will yield more money by just going more aggressively out of the gate versus taking the risk for maybe just an extra $500 if it's going to take 3 weeks at the higher price point. So you can play with those numbers. I think one final bonus tip I will give you is I really love the Walmart pricing model. It's done really well for us at Good Life Property Management, meaning instead of going 5,700, go 5,695. So if you go to our website, down at the bottom, we have a free instant rent analysis. This is where you can use the tool that I showed you with Rent-A-Meter for free, and we'll put a link to that in the description.
Running comps and pricing your property isn't just a box to check, it's one of the most important steps to pricing your rental right and attracting great tenants. Want to know if rent control limits how much you can charge or how much you can raise rent next year? Then watch our rent control video next, where I break down exactly what California landlords need to know to stay compliant and profitable. Thanks for watching, and please hit like and subscribe to get this video out to more landlords just like you.